We're going to remove a head off a Nike club. After placing it in the Billy Bob extractor, heat it up using a heat gun for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. The metal will be hot, so use precaution when removing it. Once heating is finished, crank up the jack and the head will slide off. Then, take a wire brush and run it through the hosel to clean out any epoxy. After removing the head from the shaft, you need to clean all the old epoxy off the shaft. Using a 1x42 microbelt for a microbelt sander, you can sand off all the epoxy from the shaft without damaging the fibers in a graphite shaft. First, turn on the sander, and using easy pressure, turn the shaft against the belt with one hand while holding it with the other. All of the epoxy is removed and the shaft is now prepped. Be sure not to touch the prepped part with your hand, as the oils from your hand can degrade the epoxy when you build the club. To prep a new shaft, you need to have at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches of paint removal. Using a 1x42 microbelt from a microbelt sander, you can remove the paint. First, turn on the sander, and using easy pressure, turn the shaft against the belt with one hand while holding it with the other. If you push too hard or use too much pressure, you can damage the shaft or remove too much paint. These are the two most popular Nike clubs that are out now, the Sasquatch and the Sumo. The Sasquatch is a 460 and it has a deep receiver groove. Billy Bob's makes a ferrule that fits exactly in the Sasquatch. This is the ferrule, and as you can see, the fit is almost perfect. It probably won't have to be finished. The Nike Sumo is different. It has a much deeper receiver groove in the hosel, as well as a smaller outer diameter. We make a ferrule that fits right in the receiver hole. I suggest on the Sumo to turn it down a little. As I mentioned, you don't need to worry about it on the Sasquatch. Now we're going to assemble the Sumo. First, mix the epoxy. Put a little bit of epoxy on the shaft, and then slide the ferrule over the top. Place more epoxy on the ferrule. Put a little epoxy on the hosel, and then insert the shaft with the adapter into the hosel. Make sure you have a good coating. Push the shaft all the way down into the head. Using a paper towel and some alcohol, clean off the excess epoxy. It's tight to the hosel, and you can turn this ferrule down. To turn down the Sumo ferrule, use a cloth belt. Using one hand to hold the club and one hand to turn the club, rotate the ferrule against the belt. Using a paper towel and some acetone, clean it off and it will give it a nice finish. Add a little more acetone and it will shine up even more. Next, we have the Nike Sasquatch. As you can see, the head is hollow. Most driver heads are hollow. There is an opening at the bottom of the hosel that must be filled so that epoxy doesn't leak into it. If epoxy gets into that hole, it will dry and there will be a rattle in the club when your customer goes to use it. To avoid this problem, Billy Bob's has created a hosel plug with a protrusion that allows it to be held firmly, making insertion easier. Make sure that the plug is inserted all the way down and that it rests flat.